Hey friends, welcome back to Boots and Bounty Homestead. My name is Casey and we are inside Casey's kitchen today. I was invited to be a part of a collaboration by Janet at Homestead Where You Are. This is a feast in a jar, and I will put the hashtag here below. Also in the description will be the link to the host YouTube page, as well as the collaboration playlist. So go check out all the channels that were invited to participate in the collaboration and go see what kind of feast they are making in their jars today. So for my recipe, I decided to go ahead and add something new to the pantry. In the what I would can and what I wouldn't can again video that I recently did earlier this year, I talked about a few things that I would like to add to the pantry. Well, the recipe I'm going to show you today is one of those items. Now you can actually make this recipe several different ways in preservation. Now if you want to, I will link the direct link below of where I got this recipe from that uses freeze-dried beans, freeze-dried rice, cheese powders, different things like that that you can go ahead and put in a jar, vacuum seal, and keep on your shelf indefinitely. Well, I don't have a freeze dryer yet, but I want to do this recipe in a traditional pressure canning method. Now, if you don't want to do this method, you can go ahead and pre-cook your beans, pre-cook your rice, and then dehydrate them. And then the items that you don't have on hand, you can just add them whenever you fix it, which I will explain on how to do that later. There may be some things that you want to wait and add a little while later whenever you actually fix this casserole dish, or you can go ahead and try to either make it yourself or purchase it pre-made in a powder form. So it's totally up to you. But like I said, I'll have the original recipe link down below that uses those freeze-dried items. And then I'm going to type out the recipe and put it in the description below on what we are actually going to make today and do it in a pressure canning method. So that way it's just a pour together, bake in a casserole dish, and here you go kind of fast food meal for the homestead. But before I start this recipe, I have to refill my taco seasoning mix real quick and use this in the recipe. So hang tight, let me do this real quick. Now to keep this recipe really simple, I'm using an even amount of jars. Well, you can still do 6 jars in a canner, in a pressure canner, and it work out. That 7th jar just fits in the middle. And if you have any problems, you can put an empty jar with just water in it inside the middle to kind of take up that space so they're not bubbling around. I have acclimated it for it being used for 6 quart jars. Now, if you use a no-soak method for beans, the rule of thumb is to keep any beans about the size of black beans or red beans that like we're going to use here. You want to keep it at or under a quarter of the amount the jar will hold. Being said, a quart jar here holds 4 cups. So a quarter of that is going to be 1 cup. So we are putting the equivalent of 1 cup of beans in each quart jar. So what that means is we're going to use a half a cup of black beans and a half a cup of red beans per jar. So if you want to do the full recipe for the 6 quarts, that means you will need 3 cups each of black beans and red beans. Now you can do it completely out of black beans or you can do it completely out of red beans. That just means you will need 6 cups of each. So I'm doing half a half. We're doing 3 cups each bean, and now it's time to add our spices. So total, you will need 6 tablespoons of the taco seasoning. This will be 1 tablespoon in each jar. Next, we're going to put in garlic powder, and this is going to be a teaspoon per jar. So you will need in total 6 teaspoons. The next ingredient is going to be oregano. Now I use my homegrown oregano, and it is still whole. So I'm going to just have to eyeball it, about a half a teaspoon per jar. Next, we're going to be doing a half a teaspoon of cumin. So you'll need 3 teaspoons in total, or 1 tablespoon. And if you make this, you can make this just by itself. Go down to a 1/6 of the recipe and cook it in a pot. See if you like it first, and then you'll know how to adjust your spices for that once you try it. Now we're doing a half a teaspoon of Redmond real salt. And then I'm going to do about a 1/4 cup of minced onion in each jar. Well guys, that is it for the recipe in the jar. Now you can see the difference if these were being used for the freeze-dried beans. You would, obviously the beans would be bigger and you would have more in the jars. They would still look just like this. They would still have the layered effect, but it would actually be full. Or you can do this in a pint jar and just have more smaller individual sized meals that are ready. So now all we need to do is fill this to 1-inch headspace with either water or a broth. That is up to you. You're still going to process at the same time no matter which kind of liquid you use. And I may do half and half. What about that, guys? Okay, I'm going to use probably 2 of these to do with chicken broth, and then I'm going to do the rest of them in water. I want to see the difference in the flavor, how they cook up. Still going to cook the same way. Alright, so here is my chicken broth. So these 3 are going to be my chicken broth. These 3 will be water. So that I can tell them apart, I am going to put a C on my lid for chicken broth and a W on my lid for water. Now, what we want to do is go ahead and wipe these rims off. You can give them a shake. Make sure you get all the air bubbles out of them. Go ahead and top any off that need a little bit of extra water. I think I've got 2 here that need a little bit. And most canning jars will have ridges on the bottom. So instead of using a deep bubbler tool or something like that, because this has so much liquid in it, what you can do is you can usually just twist them like this, and those ridges on the bottom of the jars vibrate, and it will cause all of those bubbles to come up. Don't take my word for it though. You can do at your own risk. But that's how I debubble. Just kind of twist it, or you can just let them set for 10 minutes. If you don't have a knife or tool or don't want to poke anything down in it, just let them set for 10 minutes and then come back and check all your levels, make sure they are correct. So I've got all the lids on, all the rings are on, finger tight. Don't crank them down. Just do it till you can't really turn them anymore. You kind of feel that resistance. That's when you stop. Or my mom, she would do like crank it down and then pull it back to just where your fingers can move it. However you want to do it. It's just one of those things. So now we've got to fill up the pressure cooker or canner and get it ready. Now I'm using a 16 quart Presto. We want to make sure that we check everything. Make sure your ring, your seal and everything is good. Make sure all your valves are open and attached. Alright, everything looks good. nothing cracked, nothing broken. Make sure you have your disc in the bottom. And then we load her up. Now what I like to do is use a gallon pitcher, fill it up with water, because I have grown up learning to put a gallon of water in the bottom. Go by your manufacturer's guidelines on how to operate your pressure canner. I'm just going to do it the way I've always done it. Turn it on high. Line up your arrows with your canner. Push down and twist. Now, here's where I come in. Research, do what your book says. Don't always have to follow me, but this is the way I've always done it. I grew up this way, doing it the last 30 years this way, and that's the way I'm going to do it. So, here's what I'm going to say. Your book is probably going to tell you, and other YouTubers are going to tell you, bring this up to heat, let it vent the steam out of the little hole in the middle for 10 minutes, and then put your weight on. I have never done that. That's just what I keep hearing everybody else say, so I'm going to reiterate that to you. Do your own research, follow your own instructional booklet with your pressure canner. But all I'm going to do is put 10 pounds of weight on here, and then when it jiggles, I'm going to turn it down. That's it. Now we are using 10 pounds of weight. This is the one that comes with it. This is your 5-pound weight. This is the 10-pound weight. I'm going to pop it on here, and then whenever it starts to jiggle, I'll bring you back. I would like to add right here, just as a off the record kind of tip. You may be thinking, Casey, you're such a rebel canner. Let me tell you something though. If you strictly follow ball recipe books, you're a rebel canner too. Because not all of those recipes are FDA approved. So if you want FDA approved recipes, you need to go to the FDA website and look up the canning recipes there. A lot of those you will not find anywhere else. And in the ball book, you will not find those on the FDA website. So just keep that in mind. The guidelines I'm using here are for the longest pressure cooking item, which is the beans. So the beans we would do pints at 75 and quarts at 90. That will be for any standard FDA approved bean that you are doing. The spices and the chicken broth and the water are all less than that, and you may not even find guidelines on pressure canning those spices because it's not a pressure canning item. They are just flavors, they are just spices. If they were a full vegetable, like a pepper, like a whole pepper, you would get guidelines for that, but not pepper as a spice. So the guidelines that we are following for this recipe is for the longest processing time, which is a rule of thumb guideline that you need to follow on any recipe. You can make any recipe a canning recipe as long as you follow that longest processing time for the items that are in your recipe. Therefore, we are going with beans. Beans are 75 pints, 90 quarts at 10 pounds of pressure. If your elevation is higher than the recommended guidelines and you need to move up to 15 pounds, do that. That is all this recipe is saying. So, there's my little tidbit of advice for the day. Alright guys, we've started jiggling, and that's all I've done. So from here, all we need to do is turn it down. Now I'll start with medium-high, because we want to make sure that it's not shaking it like Shakira. We want the slow little Hawaiian dancer. So this is getting too fast. I turned it down to medium-high. We're going to sit here and watch it over the next couple of minutes. If it doesn't slow down, I'm going to keep turning it down until I get it at the right rock. Now, it says it's only supposed to jiggle about 3 times an hour. So this is way too high. Now it's not on full blast anymore, and it's starting to slow down. I can listen to it in here. You see, I don't have a gauge on mine. This is the only pressure canner I've ever used. If you use a gauge, you want your gauge to stay, I think they say around 11 pounds. But again, make sure you check with your book that come with it. It's slowing down a little bit more. I'm going to turn it down just a hair. I have to stay here and get it to where I want it for a few minutes. And then it'll be fine to sit here and do its thing for 90 minutes. And I'll just kind of check it as I walk by. Everything's good. Alright, that's about where I want it. Just a slow little hula dancer. And the pressure is not coming out very loud. If you listen, the pressure is not coming out very loud. Earlier, it was spewing a lot, and it was moving pretty fast. So, over time, you will learn to listen. If you have a jiggler, you will learn to listen and do it. If you have a gauge, you know, that'll be more efficient for most of the new beginner canners to be able to gauge the pressure. Is just watch it on the gauge. Okay, so this is about where I want it. It's slow, it's not coming out very fast, rocking back and forth. So this is whenever, once I get it set, that's when I start my timer. So we're going to do a timer for 90 minutes since this is quarts. If you do pints, it'll be 75 like I mentioned earlier. Alright, I'm just going to keep an eye on it as I stay here in the house with it, because this is all open, so I'm just, you know, sitting right over there. I'll be able to hear it and work in the kitchen and do everything. So I'll be watching it for the next hour and a half, and I'll bring you back after it cools off. Once the 90 minutes is up, I'm just going to turn it off. I'm actually going to gently slide it off the eye and let it naturally cool down. Now I'll give it a couple of hours to cool down, depressurize, and all that good stuff, and then that's when I'll bring you back, probably tonight about supper time. I'll bring you guys back and we'll take them out and look at them together and see what we come up with, because I've never made this recipe. I'm winging it. I made this recipe up. So we're going to see how these beans turn out, and I hope everything goes well. Alright, it is that time. I took the weight off just to make sure all the steam was out of it. Now we're going to take the top off carefully. It's been done probably about 3 hours, so it's fine. And it looks like all of them have sealed. Alright, my jar grabber thingy is outside. So we are going to lift these up and look at them carefully. Alright, well, let's look at one. And they're still bubbling. Alright, here's our first item out. And the liquid is all the way up to the edge. So that's good. The beans are not dry. You can see them right there. They look really, really good. Alright, let's look at one of the wide mouth ones. And these are the same. Let's see, some of the spices are at the bottom. So I got it mixed up for you there. So you can see the spices in it and the beans. And in the original recipe, you'll see down below, it has a mixture of like cheeses and tomato paste and or tomato powder and rice. It's just different things that goes in it. This is the base to that casserole. So we are fixing to make this, just a 1 jar. We're going to try it out, see how it tastes and everything. And I'm going to write the full recipe down below so you can follow it and have all your ingredients and everything together. Now we're going to use 1 jar at a time. So the rice and the cheese and that stuff, that is after the canning process, it is it's going to be per jar. So whenever you print that recipe off or screenshot it or save it, just remember that you do the canning part first, and then whenever you go to use the jar, you can actually make tags to put on here or write on the top, add, you know, 1 cup of rice, 2 cups of water, or 1 cup of water, or whatever it is. And you can also go by the liquid that is in the jar. It looks like there is, let's see, in this one, it looks like there's a good bit of liquid in there, probably about a cup or so. So you can actually use part of that liquid and use it in your rice, to cook your rice. And I'm actually going to do this in a skillet. You can also do it in the oven. I'm not an oven casserole kind of girl. I'm a skillet kind of girl, so we are going to cook this in the skillet. So I'm going to move these back and get them out of the way, and let's go ahead and make one of these recipes. Alright, I'm going to turn my skillet on high. Now I'm just going to cook this in the skillet like you see here. I'm doing long grain rice. It is not instant rice. So 1 cup and usually 2 cups of water. But what I'm going to do is 1 cup of rice. And I'm going to do a large cup of water, which is a little over 1. And I've got to open my jar and it is hot. Because you will see I have a little bit of water in there. It looks like about a half a cup. So I'm gonna put a little bit more water. I'll do about a cup and a half in this batch. Now every jar you open is gonna be different in the amount of water that it has in it, as you could see from mine. So what I'm going to do is let this simmer first, let it cook about 3/4 of the way, and then the last few minutes I'm going to put the beans and everything in, so that way the rice can absorb the flavor from the beans in the last few minutes. I'm also going to add into this is about 2 ounces of tomato paste. This is just some that I had left over that I've been waiting to use. So I'm going to go ahead and add this. Are you guys excited as I am? This will be my first recipe that I made up. Okay, now we are going to bring this to a boil. And it's going to just low simmer until it is done. Like I said, once it starts, it's starting to boil now. So once it starts getting towards the end, almost all the liquid is gone. I will open up the beans and pour those in there. So I'll bring you back for that.
Look.
But they ain't gonna fit, then we gotta do something else. You cranked it and moved it a few times, and it cranked right up every time but one, and it was like dead, like the battery was dead.
Alright guys, so there is my feast in a jar recipe from beginning to end. That is making the bean base for the fajita bean and rice casserole or skillet. You can can it, put it in the pantry, bring it out and make this simple dish in about 15 minutes or so from beginning to end. Now, one thing you can also do in this recipe, if you want to can meat in your beans, so that way you only have to add rice, you can do that because you're still going to pressure it at the same amount that you would if you were cooking meat or canning meat in a recipe. You're still going to do 75 pints in 90 minutes on quarts. So if you want to do ground beef in this or some kind of ground meat, pre-cook it, put it in your recipe, or put it in your jar and then just add the water as you normally would, because you've seen that we had extra water in there. So you shouldn't have any problem with it already being pre-cooked. It's not going to absorb any water. If you want to do chicken, you can actually put raw chicken in there. It's going to help create juice and create that broth. Or you can put in shredded chicken or shredded barbecue, whatever you want to, in your fajita beans. Well, however you would eat your taco meat with your fajitas. You can do steak strips or whatever you want. I would stick to no more than about 3/4 of a cup of meat, probably not even that much, but stick around 3/4 of a cup of meat per jar if you're doing quart size, and probably down to about 1/3 of a cup of meat for pints. That way it doesn't take up any more room where you need to add the water for the beans. You can also cook this like I did here, with opening up a jar, adding the rice and the water or broth in there in the skillet and cook it. Just on the skillet, you can add your meat when it is almost done to help kind of incorporate those flavors from the beans and rice into the meat. You can add that, and this will be just a one skillet meal kind of thing, and it's ready on the pantry. The only thing you have to do is do the rice. Now you can do either long grain rice like I did, or you can do a quick cook rice. Just follow the instructions on it to use usually 2 servings. That was a good portion for this one. I did the long grain rice, 1 cup and 2 cups of water. It's a good portion for a quart size of the bean mixture. So turned out really good. You've seen us try it. We've got I've got my bowl here, and the cheese has started melting on it. It's looking really yummy. Doing really good. I did go ahead and add a little bit of salt and pepper. I tried it as it was cooking to make sure the flavors were doing good. And this is one recipe that we are going to definitely keep on our pantry shelves. I hope you enjoy. Don't forget to comment down below, because there's going to be a giveaway on May 6th on Janet's channel, Homestead Where You Are. Link is down below. Comment on all these videos, because the more you comment, the more entries you're going to get in that giveaway on May 6th at 12 p.m. Pacific time. So make sure you're in the correct time zone. As soon as you see her post that alert for the live, go ahead and hit that reminder notification. Subscribe to our channel if you like this recipe so you can enjoy more with us. We will see you next time, guys. Thanks for stopping by. See ya.